Yingzhao for sharing with us her very personal and also very genuine life journey. And I think as we have seen on the one of the last slides, I think it's time for all of us to share our own story. I would like to take this opportunity to invite every one of you to share with us or to raise any questions that you may have in your own experience, in your own integration, in your work and life balance. Any questions or any comments, thoughts that you have, the floor is open for you.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah. Yes, I really like truly enjoy your talk.
Thank you.
It's amazing. At the end of your talk, you mentioned about scarcity, and I'm trained, and I like to share some of my ideas about scarcity. And I had written a book, and I initially called it Economics of Life. Okay, and essentially my point is that our life is limited, just a few, decades of years, usually for most of us. So it's extremely scarce. So we need to make the most out of this life, and there's no time to lose, right? And so it's really important for us to take advantage of every moment that we have in order to advance. And I thoroughly agree with you that changing attitude inside is what's fundamental. And I really like also your term, Buddhist Alchemy, which is really accepting everything that comes along and changing it not from the outside but from the inside, from changing this attitude. And we need to change that attitude as soon as possible and accept it as it comes. And as I said, I thoroughly enjoyed your examples, the various examples that you mentioned, and totally agree with the central message. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in Buddhism, we are taught that this human life is precious, which I think is a beautiful, teaching, right? And and also in Christianity too, I think there is a practice of gratefulness. And I think, that's one of the places where the different religions or different wisdom traditions actually very much agree, right? We need to be grateful for this human form, this human life that we're given. And I think that's a very good foundation for practice. And I try to practice from that place, because when you are grateful, you are actually coming from the place of abundance. Yeah, our life is abundant. I mean, we are so incredibly lucky, and to experience everything that we have, right? That we encounter in this life. What an amazing journey! Life is a magical ride, and sometimes it doesn't feel that way. But indeed, I like what you say about this, this ability to shift into that place of abundance, and that has benefited me a great deal. Rather instead of this poor me, right? That actually we all have so much ability, so much power, and we're given so many gifts to be able to do something with our life and to affect those around us.
Hi, great talk.
Thank you.
I have a question which is more of almost a technological question. In your mind, what is the sort of core or what we call minimal viable product that you would call the practice? Because you obviously talked about many, many things.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if you want to explain to somebody, this is it, what would be the it, but in a short version?
That's a good question. I work in technology, so I'm very familiar with that concept of MVPs. I think it's would be quite small. And I've done a lot of traveling too, and actually I think I encounter a lot of people who have no spiritual practice per se. They're essentially living bodhisattvas. Yeah, I think people can connect with that. There are so many people with a lot of wisdom, and they have that kind of simplicity. They have that kind of straightforwardness and vitality in their life in some way. So I don't necessarily think that's a particular, that this MVP, this minimal viable product, have necessarily a form. But maybe there is a kind of a intention, I would say, of wanting to live a life that is meaningful. And I see people all around the world, no matter what language they speak or what kind of environment they grew up, they have that kind of relationship to themselves, to the people around them, and to nature. Even if the nature is just a potted plant, for example. But people have incredible agency, and I actually think, we benefit so much from learning from everyone and seeing essentially the bodhisattva nature of everyone. So I would not, so maybe that's not quite answering your question of what it might look like. Maybe to come back to that, if you have the means, I do think some kind of awareness practice is good. Whether it is meditation or if it's a walk or journaling or playing music or whatever it is that can take on different forms for different people. But some kind of a self-aware practice, I think it is very useful, rather than only outwardly directed attention. Because I think it's very useful for us to realize that this construct, this ego process, is simply a process. It's not solid, right? And to realize that it's not necessarily attached to this particular form or to this name or life experiences, a story, whatever, right? But having some kind of a self-reflective time consistently makes us realize that we're something that is more than those entities, that there is a ground, right? Or there is a silence beneath all of that.
Hi, thank you for a very wonderful talk. I have a question which could be outside of the boundary of what you have today. I was reading your biography or your bio right before the talk, and you are actually resided in a Zen temple before. And could you please share a little bit with us your experience in a Zen temple? And also, I've heard that Zen is becoming quite popular in Silicon Valley these days. And to what extent is the spirit of Zen incorporated into the high-tech Silicon Valley? Thank you very much.
Sure. Maybe I'll answer the second question first. It is interesting that Zen is easier to find popularity in Silicon Valley. In many ways, because Zen is a more formless teaching. There's not necessarily so much structure compared to other types of Buddhism. So it's actually easier for people to directly just start practicing rather than feel like they need to get this teaching or do these particular courses first or these scriptures, right? So it's very accessible in that way. Many people who practice Zen in the West, of course, don't realize that in some ways it's actually a more advanced teaching in that way, right? Like formless teaching, one benefits more from having had some foundational practice. Then you can do this self-directed, improvement kind of thing, like fine-tuning your own practice and having the awareness of how your practice is and so on. But many people, basically I'm being a little bit critical of Zen's uptake in Silicon Valley, but I think it is what it is, and I think people can benefit from other more rigorous or structured types of Buddhist practice as well. So how it has shown up in Silicon Valley life is sometimes it can become a meme, right? Just like mindfulness can become essentially a phrase with not much meaning attached to it, right? People can sell anything with Zen attached to it, right? So we need to be cautious, and also like in a very materialistic world like Silicon Valley, and basically most of the world, people can package things and attach certain labels and feel like they would have a market for it, right? Then it's marketing. So I'm quite cautious of whether or not people using Zen to mean something that is very empty, the way that people may talk about innovation the same way, or disruptive, or whatever hot words in Silicon Valley might be. However, I do also find that people are interested in practice, in deepening, I would say more so, in many ways in Silicon Valley. Like anywhere in the world, busy professionals have achieved a certain material level, right? And then they're questioning what's important. What do I really want after this like really hectic day? What would find nourishment? What would give me nourishment, right? And I have so many choices. How do I even decide? Where do I put my energy? If people can be very effective, like smart young professionals can be very effective anywhere in their lives, how do they know where to go, right? So it's these kinds of questions that I think are bringing more people to spiritual practice, and especially Zen, because it teaches essentially, sit, right? And insights would emerge, or equanimity would emerge, etc., which are things that people want. So it is finding a useful ground or useful soil in Silicon Valley, and I think any kind of practice is better than no practice, because people are smart enough to then recognize whether or not it is providing some value to them, and then any door is a door, right? Any door is better than no door, and then I trust that there's an organic process actually of people being on this path in some way, and I find that actually in many places, including Silicon Valley, young people can actually become quite sophisticated practitioners quite quickly. And it was Tibetan Buddhism that predicted that will be more awakenings in the West, right, this century. So that might be happening. And to talk a little bit about what my day in the Zen Center looks like. So 6 a.m. Zazen, meditation, right? And then a short service. And then generally the residents share breakfast, and then those who have work go off to work, which is about half of us. And those who are primarily Dharma practitioners have other responsibilities within the Zen Center. And then there's the 8 p.m. meditation as well. That's pretty much what the day looks like. And then every Sunday is a public program that is essentially provided to the public, right? That's the Dharma, spreading the Dharma, where there's 2 meditation sessions, a Dharma talk, and a public lunch, and everything is provided freely of charge. But we take donations and have other. We also have facilities for people to host retreats and guest rooms, and so people can do self-retreats. So essentially, it is a functioning Zen temple where practitioners from generally the region come. It's founded by someone called Kobenchino Roshi. He was a junior Dharma brother to Suzuki Roshi, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center. Kobenchino Roshi died young, accidentally, relatively young, in his 50s. If he had continued to live, he would have become quite well known as a spiritual teacher, and the center would have been much more well known. But for whatever circumstances, this particular Zen Center has sort of been a best kept secret in the Bay Area. And in that way, actually retained some of the simplicity and purity of a place that hasn't become an institution. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit about what it looks like. And anyone in the Bay Area, if you happen to visit the San Francisco Bay Area, you're more than welcome to visit. It is a beautiful place, as you've seen, the nature and the sort of quietude and simplicity of practice and the welcoming quality makes it a fun place for people to visit, and everyone enjoys it. Jikoji, right there, jikoji.org. Yeah, I put the contact. It may be hard to see, but you're welcome to get my contact information and stay in touch. jikoji.org. Yes.
Thank you very much for your speech. I could see that even the way you speak mimics, your message, right? There's this kind of eloquent fluidity in the way you speak, which is, I can see it's part of your practice, right? It's firmly integrated. And in the, I guess in the theme of integration, I want to ask you about failures, right? As you talked about, your growing up and, finding the difficulty to integrate with the world around you, or forming bonds with people around you, right? And it seems like, especially in this postmodern world we live in, people can be very comfortably put into their little pockets, right? Where, let's say, you can encounter someone where you don't share any similarities with them. You don't share the same language, you don't share the same cultural backgrounds, cultural references, even daily routines, are very, very different. So how do you overcome these differences? Or, if you keep reaching out to these people, or, this person, or this community, and, it keeps failing, at what point do you say, maybe this is not meant to be, maybe I should go somewhere else? And, just along that.
I hear you. So I'm trying to get the connection you're drawing between connecting with people and failing at connecting with them. So I feel like I may need a little bit more context, but let me try to answer it and see if it's helpful. And you're welcome to add more. This goal to, clearly there's a goal, right? Otherwise you wouldn't really encounter failure. If you have no expectations, then there will be no failure, right? So I think that is one thing, is to not necessarily have expectations. That's a big thing of spiritual practice, is to let go of our expectations and simply be the immediate experience of doing something and not being attached to what happens. In spiritual practice, I do also find that one has to be, one has to allow this kind of movement of people in our lives, and being able to connect with people that you weren't able to connect to before, but also including not being able to connect with people you were able to connect with before. So there are shifts happening right within you that makes you a little bit different, and that is a I don't know if people here have had the experience, but I've definitely had the like some of my friends, right? They're not Dharma sisters or brothers, and over time I've found them, like, I drifted away from them in my life. So I don't necessarily spend the effort to connect with them as I used to, and I'm okay with that. So it's also just allowing this, some people, I'm there to connect with whoever is in front of me, but I don't necessarily be attached to whether or not that happens, that actual experience happens. I trust simply that life creates these kinds of times and contexts for whatever work that I'm here to do, and whatever friendships and etc. that I'm there to make, right? But it's not necessarily, it doesn't really matter to me, right? That's another way to say it, is that I'm content and I'm solid no matter what is actually happening around me, right? I don't mind whatever happens. So then that's actually a foundation for being more possible to try different things, right? To be creative and to actually be okay with failure. Because if you're attached to who you are, right, then that failure, the price is quite high, right? Then there's shame and guilt, etc. attached. But if you are solid, you're just doing something that just comes and goes, right? A moment later it's forgotten, And indeed, it doesn't matter. It has no imprint on you, you know? And so hopefully that's a little bit helpful, is that, you know, just being there, just being the channel, ultimately that doesn't pertain to you or anyone else in particular. It's actually the situation. It's actually life.
And I mean, and that's extremely helpful. And to follow up on that, I want to ask about intentionality.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I do understand your emphasis on non-attachment, on how the notion of failure is it's hooked with the idea of expectations, right? But then when it comes to intentions, when let's say, you know, you try to create an environment, or
Yeah.
you try to create a community that is conducive to you
Yeah.
know, this kind of relationship. There has to be some kind of intention that comes into it, right? But then, what if this intention,
You question that intention.
or one questions, how does the intention,
How do you realize that intention?
yeah, how does it materialize if, you know, if one doesn't have a goal, or one doesn't have a...
I hear you. That's a really good question. So first, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you can ask yourself, like, do you trust that you're a good person? Right? You know,
Most of the time,
we all, most of the time, indeed. We have our vices, fine. But you know, I didn't used to feel this way. You know, much of my life I had so much self-doubt. Like I really questioned my self-worth, right? But now I don't question that anymore. I trust that I'm a good person. I trust that my intentions are good. You know, I trust that there's work for me to do, essentially, right? Work in the sense of, like, you know, spreading good in the world in some way, and, you know, leaving the place a better place because of my role in it, this kind of thing, right? And so then it is just trusting. It is trusting that, and then it's sensing the energy in yourself. And often it is actually a little bit physical. I think, you know, one challenge of growing up Chinese is that we can be kind of detached from our bodies, right? We're not a very physical culture, right? We're a very cerebral culture and very rational, pragmatic, which is very, very good. But it's useful to actually practice being more in touch with your body in some way, because actually a lot of the first feelings of those intentions are physical, like a feeling like there's a desire to do something, right? You feel a little bit of, like, you know, like just a slight movement, or like, you know, I want to say something, right? And so many times we hold ourselves back and decide not to say something. So one of my practices, which has been helpful, and what I teach my team, is just like, say it, you know, just try it, you know, try it more so than you had before. You don't have to do it every time, but do it more than before, and then see what happens. You will get real-time feedback in that moment. So there's, and those are small moments of courage, actually. I do think actually courage is a big thing. Courage doesn't mean, like, you know, the big challenges in life, actually, but every moment of our lives, that's how we change our life, is actually those small moments of courage, right? So I have, you know, years ago, I wouldn't have necessarily challenged anyone in a meeting, for example. I would have waited until after the meeting, right? For example, that's a more Chinese way, more indirect way. But now, depending on the situation, if I feel like, you know, there's something like sparkling up in me, right? I just honor it. I just say it. I just say the beginning of it, and now I see how it feels, right? And now I can choose the next sentence. I don't have to, like, decide to completely confront this person, but I can honor the instinct. So that's largely actually a mind-body practice. It's like get to know how instinct appears in you, right? Whether it's mental or physical or whatever, energetic. Sometimes we start to, you know, our bodies start to move a little bit, right? And honor it, give it life. That's how we manifest things, actually. That is how life comes through us.
Thank you. I think that's very beautiful, and I think I'll try to practice these, small moments of courage.
Yay, I'm happy.